Wow, I mean, just look at the size difference. This is the Anker SOLIX C1000 Gen 2. It's the newer version of the old SOLIX C1000, which is one of the most popular power stations out right now in the 1000 watt range. So this one is basically the upgraded version of that, and it's got some really cool features and upgrades. So I'm gonna give you guys a complete breakdown of some of the features that this thing has, some of the upgrades that it has. I'm gonna run some tests so you can see what it can power, and then I'll just give you guys my review. This thing's pretty awesome, so let's get in the video. So here it is up close so you guys can see it, and the first thing I just want to mention before I talk about what comes with this and everything is just the overall size of this thing. It's actually pretty insane how small this thing is. I mean, as you can see over here, I have the EcoFlow Delta 2, the EcoFlow Delta 3 Plus, and the Blue Eddy AC180 power station, and this one's in the middle, and as you can see, it's definitely a lot smaller than a lot of the competition out there, which is pretty insane. And even actually compared to the old version of this, the Gen 1 of the C1000, it's about, Anker says, 14% smaller and 11% lighter. And that is accurate because when I weighed them, the Gen 1 weighed 28.2 pounds and the Gen 2 weighed 25 pounds. So it is significantly smaller and lighter, which I think is pretty important, you know, when we're talking about a portable power station, something that you want to take with you on the go, or portability, you know, if you're camping or in the outdoors. It's pretty awesome how small they were able to actually make this as a 1000 watt power station. Now, as far as what it comes with, you get your manuals, you get a warranty card. This has a 5-year warranty on it, which is pretty awesome. You get a quick startup guide and the manual, and then you also get 2 chargers. So you actually get a car charger right here. It's got the car charger end right there, and then you get the regular outlet charger right here. So pretty awesome. It doesn't come with the solar charger. However, you can charge this up with solar. And we'll actually talk about the charging here in a little bit because that's one of the main upgrades and coolest features about this power station. It's one of the fastest charging power stations in the world. But now going over the internal components and the features around it, this is a 1024 watt battery capacity power station. So it's actually a little bit smaller than the Gen 1 version. The Gen 1 was 1056 watts. This is 1024. So a little bit smaller, but not much, only like 20 something watts. So not very much. Now, as far as how much power this can actually output, this can have a continuous output of 2000 watts, which is actually a pretty nice upgrade from the Anker SOLIX Gen 1. The old one had 1800 watts of continuous and up to 2400 watts of surge. This one has 2000 watts of continuous and up to 3000 watts of surge. Now, surge doesn't really matter in my opinion that much, just because you're not going to be using that much. But as far as the continuous goes, to go from 1800 to 2000, that is a pretty awesome little upgrade, 200 watts more. And it's really nice because you can plug in, you know, 2 different devices that use up to around 1000 watts each, and it can actually run it continuously. Whereas most other power stations in the 1000 watt range, you know, just do not have that continuous output. So that's pretty awesome what this has. And we do have 5 3-prong AC outlets, which is actually 1 shorter than the Gen 1. The Gen 1 had 6 outlets. This one has 5, so 1 less. Although you're never really using all 6 anyway, so I think 5 is perfectly fine. And as you can see, we have 1 dedicated to the surge pad, meaning if you did have a device that used more than 2000 watts of continuous power, but was able to lower the voltage to continue running like a toaster, you would want to plug it into this one, so that way it was able to handle that surge. And then going over here on the top, we have 3 USB-Cs and 1 USB-A, and that's actually a pretty cool upgrade as well. The old one only had 2 USB-Cs and 2 USB-As. This one has 3 USB-Cs, which everything pretty much is going to USB-C now, so I would rather have more USB-Cs than USB-A. And as you can see, I don't know if you can see that, but it has these USB-Cs have 140 watts of output, 140 watts, 15 watts, and then 12 watts on the USB-A. So you'll have plenty of power to be able to charge your devices like laptops and things like that. I will say, in order to get the 140 watts of output though, you will have to get a specific cable for that. You know, Anker has a lot of different charging products, things like that, and so they're really good at charging. And it's pretty awesome to see that how much output. I think that is the highest of any power station I've seen on a USB-C on a power station. I'm pretty sure, which is pretty awesome because you're gonna be able to charge your devices, you know, even faster or run, you know, quite a bit more power out of this USB-C. But that cable, you know, will have to have the sufficient power to be able to get up to that, you know, 140 watts of output. But pretty awesome that they have that. And then right here, you actually have your power button. When you first turn it on, you wanna hold it for like 3 seconds and then it'll turn on. And you got kind of an upgraded screen here. It's pretty cool. You got that all kind of clear material, which I think looks really nice. And you have just the screen in the middle, but it's all on kind of one screen. When you look over here, you can see the battery percentage. So right now it's at 86%. And what's actually cool about this power station is you don't have to click a button to turn on the DC power. The only button you have to click is the AC power, but when you click right here, as you can see, it'll actually turn on and it'll show that the AC power is turned on. Everything else just turns on automatically when you plug something in here to the DC power. And then once you actually plug something in, which I'll show you guys later when I do tests, it'll actually update to show you how much time, this can charge that specific device, how many watts of output when you charge it, how many watts of input, and it'll update on the screen right there. And then going over here on the side, we actually have the DC car socket right here, the car charger, so it is on the side now instead of the front. Going along with that though, with the car port on the side, one thing that is a little bit different about this power station, which some people might not like, is that it doesn't have an expander port. Normally the expander port is on the side and the DC car socket is on the front. And so with this power station, you don't have an expanding port. And so you actually can't expand this power station. For me, I think what Anker was going for with this power station is they're making it super lightweight and portable. This is a portable power station. And so if you actually wanted to add another battery on top of this, it wouldn't be very portable, And so I actually personally don't have a problem with this. I feel like a 1,000 watt power station is smaller anyways. And so, if you're going to want 3,000 watts of battery capacity, you might as well just get a 3,000 watt battery capacity power station instead of adding it on. And so I really don't have a problem with the, not the extension port, but I can see how some people, might not like that. That might be a disadvantage, versus the Gen 1, which does have that, expander port. But yeah, just thought I'd mention that. And then above the, car socket, you have your vent right here, basically to get ventilation so it doesn't overheat and things like that. You also have your vent over here. And then on this side, you have your charging ports. So right here, you have your just wall charger outlet, and then you have your protection right here, overload protection, and then you have your solar input right here. And as you can see, you can input up to 600 watts of solar, which is pretty awesome. Which is actually the same as the Gen 1, but it's pretty amazing because with that, you're gonna be able to charge this thing up in about 1.8 hours with solar panels. If you have the sufficient solar panels to get up to that 600 watts of input, which is pretty awesome for a 1,000 watt power station. To be able to charge it in under 2 hours, that is amazing. And what's even more amazing than that is the input of the actual wall charging. This can have an input up to 1,200 watts. But it also has another charging mode called ultra fast charging, and you can actually get up to 1,600 watts of inputs, which actually won a Guinness World Record for the fastest charging power station in the world. So pretty amazing. So that is definitely a really cool update this is going to be one of the fastest charging power stations in the world, which you think would happen coming from Anker, just because they have they focus on charging devices and things like that and cables, and this is basically the fastest charging power station in the world, which is pretty amazing. Now that is the ultra fast charging mode. It does suggest to keep your battery safe or to make it last longer to just use the regular charging mode at 1,200 watts, which is still a lot of input. It's gonna be able to charge it very fast. And with that charging, you're gonna be able to charge this up in about 49 minutes, which is the fastest charging I've ever seen for a 1,000 watt power station, and which is why it won a Guinness World Record, which is pretty amazing. Now, as far as the battery composition, this is a LFP battery, or lithium iron phosphate battery, which pretty much all the big brands use that type of battery chemistry because it's some of the longest lasting and safest batteries out there. And this one in particular has rated up to 4,000 plus battery life cycles, so it should last you 10 plus years if you were to use this thing every single day. And that's just to degrade down to 80%, so it actually should last, quite a bit longer than that as well. The one kind of downside of this power station versus the Gen 1 is that this actually doesn't have an expander port. As you can see on the side, it's got the DC port. Normally you'd have the expander port on the side, and so that is one downside of the Gen 2, is that once you get this power station, you're not going to be able to expand it for a bigger power station or to make it have more capacity. And so that's one thing to keep in mind as well. And then on the top here, you have the Anker SOLIX logo, which is pretty cool. You got kind of like a carbon fiber look. And then you have the two handles as well, so it's super easy to move around. But anyways, now we went over some of the things on the power station. I want to get into some tests. So first we're going to test out the charging to see if it actually has that up to 1,600 watts on the ultra fast charging mode, and then we're going to run some tests to see what this thing can actually power. All right, so I have it plugged into the wall now. Now I'm just going to plug this in to the side, and let's see what happens. So it looks like in the app right now it shows up AC input. It's showing 511 watts, but it's growing. Now it says 1,206 watts. So it should go up to, it should be at 1,200 watts. So there we go. So yeah, it actually is at 1,200 watts. As you guys can see, 1,207 watts. That's doing what it says. Now I'm going to put on the ultra fast charging mode and we'll see what happens. It's at 63%. You get kind of a charging icon when you first do that. And let's see, 1,542 watts. Wow. So it's not quite at 1,600. I'm thinking it might raise up here in a second, so we'll wait and see. But It's still at 1545. I'm not sure why it's not going up to exactly 1600. That's pretty awesome to see. That's the most input I've ever seen on a power station, and it actually is working. As you can see right here, it says from 66% to 100. It's saying right now on the screen it'll take about 0.3 hours. So about 15 minutes or so, it should be at 100%. It went up a little bit more, now it's at 1551. So I think it should get to that 1600 actually eventually. I think it just needs to kind of warm up for a second. I think it should actually get up to 1600 eventually. It just might take a while. But even at 1500, that's insane. That's still like the most I've ever seen on a power station of input, at least on a 1,000-watt power station. That's pretty crazy. So a little bit less than 1600. I think after a while it will raise. It might be too because it's already at 70%. So maybe if it was at like 0%, it'd go up to 1600 right away. But yeah, pretty awesome to see, guys. The fast charging does work. Maybe a little bit less than 1600, but it's very fast. All right, now I just want to run some actual power tests for you guys. So we have some devices that use around 1,000 watts each. So this is a panini maker. It uses about 1,000 watts of output, and then one of these on the toaster uses about 700 watts. So it should be around 1,700 watts, which this has a 2,000 watt output, so it should have no problem powering these. But we're gonna test them out, and then we're gonna actually test out the surge a little bit later as well. But let me turn it on and turn on the AC output, and I'll plug it in right here, boom. And as you can see, it's turned on, and it's showing about 1,152 watts of output right now. Let me zoom in there so you can see. So yeah, 1,152 watts of output. As you can see, it's handling it no problem at all. On the screen, it says it can run that for about 0.7 hours at 88%. And now I'll actually plug in the toaster as well, and we'll see what happens. So it's got 2,000 watts of max output. And I'm gonna put the toaster down right here. Let me zoom this out, boom. And let's see what happens. Okay, it looks like we're at 1,857 watts, almost 1,900 watts. Let me zoom in real quick. 1,887. It says it's able to run it for about 0.4 hours. And pretty awesome, look at that. It's able to power it no problem. I'm just gonna wait a little bit longer because usually sometimes after about 30 seconds, that's a good kind of measure to see how long it'll actually be able to run it. So let's go for another like 20 seconds or so. All right, it's been about 30 seconds and look at that, still going, no problem at all. That's pretty awesome, pretty amazing for a power station like this. And I'm actually gonna try plugging in one more thing to see if it can power that as well. So right now we're at 1,875. One thing about a toaster is that a toaster, a lot of times, you can actually use that 3,000 watt surge, because toasters, what you can actually do is power stations can lower the voltage and they'll still power the toaster. It'll make a lot less heat. So it'll basically power the toaster but make less heat. So it's gonna take longer to, like, you know, toast your bread and stuff like that, but it can lower the voltage and still power it. You know, even if it's over it'll basically just keep it under 2,000 watts. So I'm actually gonna plug in one more thing and I'm gonna see if it can actually do it at the same time. All right, so what I'm gonna do is I actually have this little blender right here, and this uses about 160 watts. Just so you guys can see, I'll actually turn it on. So yeah, it uses about 160 watts, actually even more. It looks like it went up to like almost 200 watts. So it should be over, before it was like almost 1,900 watts with these two going. So it should be over the 2,000 watt mark, and we're gonna see if it can handle it all or what it's gonna do. I'm actually gonna plug in the toaster into the surge outlet right here. And it might either shut off because it's over 2,000 watts, or what it might do is it might actually adjust this toaster and make it less hot and keep it under the 2,000 watt mark still. So we're gonna test it out, see what happens. I'm gonna plug in the panini maker. Boom, panini maker's on. See how many watts we're using. We're using 1,152. Now I'm gonna turn on the toaster, and it should go up. All right, so now we're at 1,887, almost 1,900 watts. And this should put it over the top of 2,000. So let's see what happens. 2,043. It's actually able to handle it. All right, so I think what happened is because it was around 2,000 watts, it was really close. It was still able to actually handle it, and it didn't actually kick off the. It didn't actually shut off yet, so that's pretty cool to see. So it definitely is able to handle 2,000 watts, which that's an awesome upgrade because for the old, Gen 1 version of this, it would have just shut off because it could only handle up to 1,800, or it would have adjusted, the toaster. But pretty awesome to see. All right, I'm actually gonna try something else now. I got a 1,000 watt blender, so I think it should use about 1,000 watts. I want to just see how much higher over 2,000 watts you can go, or kind of what kicks it on. I was trying to look for other devices, but so I'm gonna plug this blender in real quick, and I'll turn it on, and we'll see how much power this actually uses first. So let me turn it on right now. Let me do low. Dang, so it actually doesn't use that much power. So I guess it only uses like 350 watts. So maybe I'll try plugging in this. I'll try plugging in all four at the same time and just see what happens. I think that's definitely gonna overload it. So we'll see. So first I'll do the toaster. Is the toaster plugged in? All right, let me plug in the toaster real quick. Like this. Actually, let me do this one first. And actually, I'm gonna plug the toaster in over here. All right, so let me do this real quick. So I have this plugged in right now. So we're at 1,100 watts. Now I'm gonna do the toaster. Should be at like 2,000 watts or 1,900 watts. Now I'm gonna do this blender real quick, the big blender. So turn it on. 2187. Looks like we're at 2177. Okay, so it looks like it actually just kicked on. As you can see, the blender. Let me do this one actually. Wow. All four are going at the same time. And it's actually under 2,000 watts now. All right, so that was actually really cool to see. Basically what happened was, I don't know if you guys could hear on this big blender right here, but it actually got a lot quieter because essentially what happened on certain devices, you can basically lower the power output, but still have the device run. So as you guys can see, we're using more power than before, but it was actually the power station was actually able to make it still under 2,000 watts while still running. So the blender didn't have as much power, and the toaster, probably wasn't as hot as it would be, but it was still all able to run it at the same time, all four of these devices, which is pretty amazing for a power station at the 1,000 watt battery capacity. Now that's not gonna work on all devices because some devices you just can't, it needs full power all the time for it to work. But for something like a blender or toaster, you're able to run it and it's able to maintain that. So that's where that surge kicks in. It has up to 3,000 watts of surge, and using that surge, it allows it to be able to maintain it under 2,000 watts while still being able to run all the devices. So that was a really cool test to see. That's the most power I've ever been able to run on a 1,000 watt, around 1,000 watt battery capacity. And I've tested out a bunch of different power stations. That's pretty much the only one. I think that is the only one at the 1,000 watt range that's actually been able to do that. So really cool test to see. Pretty amazing right there. All right, and lastly, I want to do another test just with a full-size refrigerator. This is a double-sided refrigerator, just so you guys can see how this can actually run a fridge. I'm going to do a test later on to see, actually how long, if this is at 100%, how long it can actually run a refrigerator. But for right now, I'm just going to show you guys, that it can actually run it. So I have it plugged in right here, and I don't think the compressor's on right now, so it's probably not going to show very much power. Actually, maybe it is on. So it's at 157 watts, and then I think it turned on just because it turned off just because the compressor's not on yet. So, but I'll show you guys right here. If you open it up, you can see that the power's on, right? Now you can see the light on and everything. And when I actually open it up, it'll show, around 20 watts. That's just the refrigerator using the lights. But I'll show you guys once the compressor actually kicks on. I'll show you guys how many watts, the fridge is outputting, and then I'll show you guys how much time it says that it can actually power it. All right, so I waited a little bit, and the compressor is finally on. It seems like, at least now it's using about 108 watts, and we're at 62% battery. It says it's going to charge it for about 4.5 hours. Like I said, I'm going to do a full video later on, hopefully, just showing how long from start to finish this can actually run. Once the compressor turns off, that number will actually go up too as well. So it actually should be well over 10 hours to be able to run the refrigerator, just because, once the compressor turns off, it's going to be using a lot less power. This is basically saying with the 108 watts continuous, it's going to do 4.5 hours. But once the compressor turns off, it'll be a lot longer than that. So I'm guessing over 10 hours at least, this is going to be able to run the refrigerator, probably even longer than that, maybe 11, 12 hours. But yeah, pretty cool to see that it is able to run a double-sided refrigerator, no problem at all, and for a pretty long time. So if you did have a power outage, you needed to power your refrigerator, or if you're going to power, one of those like portable coolers, electric coolers while you're camping, one of those should last even well over this, maybe even like 15 to 20 hours for one of those as well. So pretty awesome, cool to see that it's able to run a refrigerator. All right, so overall, as far as my review goes, I think this is an awesome power station. It's crazy, honestly, how small it is compared to some of the other ones out there. To have 1,000 watts of battery capacity and be able to have 2,000 watts of max output, I think it's awesome. Like I said earlier, one downside is that you can't expand this. So if you are looking to, get a power station at first 1,000 watts and eventually maybe upgrade to more power, maybe this isn't the power station for you. Maybe you want to get the, Gen 1 SOLIX C1000. But if you're just looking for portability, you want to have that amount of power, up to 2,000 watts of output, 1,000 watt battery capacity power station, and you want that portability, because I feel like that's what this was made for, to be portable, to be able to take it with you on the go super easily. And that's what I'm pretty much using this for. I don't really care about, upgrading this higher. I would just get a bigger power station for that. But for what this is, it's pretty amazing. You have 5 different outlets you can plug into, 3 USB-Cs, really fast charging USB-Cs. So I think it's just a really cool, awesome power station, and it just looks really nice as well. Really good quality, and just so small and portable for how much power you get. So if you guys are looking for a very portable power station, but still has quite a bit of power to power basically all the essential items in your house, or basic items in your house, refrigerator, TV, things like that, definitely recommend checking this out. Awesome option in my opinion.